Indiana's 81st district is growing. Northwest Fort Wayne continues to expand. Huntertown is building fast. Arcola still holds small town identity just miles from city limits. Growth brings opportunity, but it also brings pressure. Crowded schools, higher property taxes, infrastructure that struggles to keep up. In a district like this, representation can't just react, it has to anticipate. Tonight's guest believes District 81 deserves leadership that balances growth with stability and keeps working families at the center of policy. Our guest tonight is Sharon Wight, a Democratic candidate for Indiana State House District 81, serving communities across Northwest Fort Wayne, Huntertown, Arcola, and surrounding Allen County neighborhoods. District 81 represents a mix of suburban expansion and long-established communities, a district where families are navigating rising costs, education funding concerns, and infrastructure challenges tied to rapid growth. Sharon is running on priorities that include strengthening public education, addressing healthcare affordability, and ensuring that growth benefits residents rather than overwhelming them. This is a district that expects responsiveness. Voters here want to know who will show up, who will listen, and who will deliver. Tonight, we go beyond campaign language to ask what she would actually do at the State House, how she would compete in a politically competitive area of Allen County, and what accountability means in District 81. Sharon, welcome to Hold Them Accountable.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Let's start off with District 81 is growing rapidly. How should the state support infrastructure to keep pace?
So you are absolutely correct that District 81 is growing rapidly. I have grown up in this area, not just in Fort Wayne, but in this area of Allen County. My mother still lives in the house that I grew up in, and all of the homes that I've ever purchased have been within this area. And I have noticed so much change in my almost 4 decades of life that has been really positive in some ways, but also really negative in other ways. So I think that one of the first things that we need to do at the State House is we need to start budgeting for items that support that growth in not just Allen County, but all areas where we see growth happening. Um, Allen County had several years ago, and I think they're still working on this road to 1 million. And the State House needs to understand that if they want to attract people, we need to provide infrastructure. So one of my areas that is really not fun to talk about, but is really important to talk about are roads. Roads are so important to infrastructure. And I'm not just talking about highways, I'm talking about the little roads that get you from neighborhood to neighborhood, that get you connected to your community. And it's not just building new roads, which is something that's having to happen as this growth is happening, but also making sure that we're budgeting for the maintenance of those roads and budgeting for what materials we're going to use and not just continuing to patch those items over and over just because it's cheap. It's impossible in District 81 to avoid potholes, and it's impossible in most of Indiana right now to avoid potholes. But I feel like at least up in District 81, it seems like they are there all year round. It doesn't matter how many times they try to patch them. And I'm sure that this is because they're not budgeting for sustainable solutions. Also, an investment into public transportation. I have traveled the world. I've had the opportunity to go as far away as Tokyo and Paris, gone to New York, San Diego, I've gone to a number of places that have really solid public transportation infrastructure, which is not something that we have in Fort Wayne. And in fact, about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, they cut way back on public transportation. Most of District 81, almost all of it, has absolutely no bus service going to it, which as someone who loves to ride public transportation and makes a point of doing so when I am in other cities, it actually really frustrates me. I don't like having to drive everywhere, and also having more cars on the road means more damage to the infrastructure of roads. So these are very much intertwined issues. I'm also very big on accessibility. It's a very important area to me. And accessibility covers a large number of things, but specifically related to infrastructure, that we need to have focus on accessibility of local and statewide facilities. Anybody needs to be able to walk into a facility and easily find their way to whatever it is they need to do for daily life, whether that's getting a marriage license, getting talking to someone about a divorce, going to court for some reason, filing for running for office, or any of the other things that we ever have to go to those offices for. The first step is making sure that they are actually accessible for anybody with mobility needs, or even just who has to take a stroller with them because they have their little one with them. Um, when we make things more accessible, this positively impacts people that we can't even begin to guess it will impact. There's also, we are very lucky. I was watching my friend Carl Stutzman's interview with you, where he talked about broadband internet in his corner of the woods. We've been really lucky in Allen County, where there has been a good push for broadband internet out into the county, but it takes time. It takes longer than perhaps it would if we had more budget for it. Um, and there are some areas still where certain types of internet are locked out, like most of the apartment complexes, most of those low income areas in the entire city and the entire county are locked into one specific provider. They might tell you that you can use whatever provider that you want, but then you come to find out, oh no, it's really just the one. Everything else is more complicated than it needs to be. And so that also limits things as far as affordability. So also ensuring that established neighborhoods are not left behind for the shiny and new. Um, like I believe I said at the beginning of this, my mother still lives in the same place that I grew up in. And I feel like she deserves to have infrastructure in place just as much as all of these new neighborhoods that are going in that are going to be beautiful. But, there are times where electrical lines have issues, that type of thing. And some of the worst roads in our city are the ones that are the most traveled every day, that are those smaller roads. We also need to revisit some of these older neighborhoods. My second home that I purchased as an adult, I lived in a neighborhood that had been built in the 70s. And that neighborhood did not, at the time, provide sidewalks and did not provide lighting in the actual neighborhood, even though it was in the middle of the city just a few short years later. It would have been on the HOA to provide those things, and the HOA didn't want to charge. We paid less than $100 a year for our HOA fees, which was great, but it meant that there wasn't a lot to work with as far as adding those things. So you have this neighborhood in the middle of the city that has none of that neighborhood feel and wasn't very walkable. And probably the most important thing here, I think anyway, is that we need to ensure that township government is staying in place to help with infrastructure and has the support and infrastructure in order to continue to be effective. I know that this has been a conversation down at the State House. They're talking about getting rid of township government. I absolutely oppose that. That is not what we should be doing, because government should always be starting from the bottom up. Local government knows what its people need far more than people at the state level do, and certainly more than what people at the federal level do. And so township government is where we can get that information about what is actually needed from our constituents, rather than trying to guess. There's no reason for us to try to guess at the state house what people need, when we could be working alongside township government as well as our actual constituents.
School enrollment continues to increase in Northwest Fort Wayne and Huntertown. What funding reforms are needed?
So many funding reforms are needed. And I don't even know totally if it's a funding reform that's needed. I think one of the things we need the most is a funding reversion, which is going back to public school dollars actually going into the public schools, getting rid of school choice programs, and uh, if you want to go to private school, send your children to private school, but on your own dime. It should not take away from our public school children and our public school teachers. Anybody who teaches in a school has worked hard for the program that they're doing. But in public school, especially, there are so many additional things that public school teachers have to do, from providing their own materials to making sure that they're taking continuing ed to maintaining their license to begin with. And we don't know if that's what's happening in public or in voucher schools. We just don't know if they have those same standards. So obviously we could get quite a bit more money back into our public schooling if we didn't have those voucher programs. also we need to start thinking about additional revenue sources, especially if we'll be talking about property taxes, I think, in a couple of minutes. But if we are going to have property tax caps, then we need to look at it and go, okay, how are we going to bring that money in? Where is it going to come from? Admittedly, it's probably going to need to come from large corporations that are coming into the area who, say that they're going to pay a certain level or have a certain number of jobs, which they don't generally. Also, Northwest Allen County Schools was one of 6 school districts in the state of Indiana that did a tax referendum attempt last year. I believe, though I would have to look it up to be absolutely sure, but I believe it is the only one that failed. And there are several reasons for why it failed, but for me, it's not so much the why it failed. What did people not know about it? One of the things that I don't think people realized was that it was really only going to be, it was either going to be $30 a person more or $30 a household more. And yes, I know when things are tight, when you're on a fixed income, that is incredibly difficult to swallow. But it also would have helped with school infrastructure and also made it so that we weren't having to continually provide things through charitable means and whatnot. I do believe that this needs to be controlled better at the state level so that individual districts are not having to fight for what they need. So don't get me wrong about that. I don't think we should be doing referendums all over the place. But if the state is going to push that, I feel like people need to be better educated on how much the cost actually is and what it actually does, where that money is actually going to go. I want to make it very clear that I am a proud product of public schooling. I went to Fort Wayne Community Schools. I went to Holland Elementary, Northwood Middle School, and Northside High School. I would not be who I am today without public schooling. Very much believe in it. And I believe that one of the best ways that people can learn about the world is through public education and being forced into situations where they're having to learn about other cultures. They're having to learn about how to engage in conflict with people who aren't exactly like them. And so very much a supporter of public schooling and making sure that our teachers and administrative staff and students get the things that they need.
You were talking about property taxes.
I was
They're a concern for suburban homeowners. What changes would you advocate?
So, first, I want to address anybody watching this. I know property taxes are a concern. I know that the way that they're currently rolled out is a concern. I mean, I have a mother whose home has been paid off for a number of years, and I would love to know that, if for some reason she couldn't pay her property taxes, that she would be absolutely fine, that we would not lose the family home. We have a family farm out in Missouri. I would love to know that since that has been paid off for at least a generation, that we would not lose that land. I understand that they're a concern. I think there needs to be a balance between what we're doing to the average homeowner, what we're charging to the average homeowner that owns the property that they live in, whether that is something they're still paying a mortgage on, or whether it's something that they own outright, versus large corporate entities. I feel like that is really where we should be targeting some of these higher property taxes, where that we have people or we have entities that own large apartment complexes or own numbers of apartment buildings or even just several homes, or people who own Airbnb under the umbrella of a large corporation. We need to be looking at how we are taxing those individuals and tax those individuals at a higher rate. We are seeing, like I said, we're seeing growth by large corporate entities. Just in my area alone, up in District 81, there are a number of different apartment complexes that look a little bit different. Like there's one place off of a road called Hillegas up here in District 81, where it looked like they were building duplexes to be purchased by people. It turns out now those are all being rented out by, I believe it's, I'm not going to say the name of the entity, but they're all being rented out. So if you were someone who wanted to buy a townhouse or a duplex, maybe you want to have less maintenance, to have a smaller place, that type of thing. It was in a good part of town. It was going to be a really easy place to get in and out of. You're not going to be able to do that now because it is owned by a corporate entity that is renting it out. Sure, it has those other things probably. It has hopefully the maintenance. It has, the location and everything still, but you're not owning that property. So you're at the whim of whatever rules they want to make. There's another property that's going in off of Wallen Road. Um, that I believe are going to be 2 and 3 bedroom. They kind of it looks more like a mobile home park than it does duplex type situation. They look like they're kind of standalone. They don't have garages. And those are still going to be $1,500 a month. So they're calling them affordable housing, but they're still going to be $1,500 a month based on some research that I did. So they don't have a garage. They're $1,500 a month. They don't necessarily look the most attractive. They certainly don't look accessible. It looks like you have to take a couple of steps up into them. And so we have these corporate entities that are building these homes that are more expensive, not helping the affordability issue at all. Um, and I believe these are still taxed at a rate that is very similar to homeowners, or what I call homegrown landlords. So the person who, like, I was very briefly a landlord because I had worked at our housing authority when I was in college, and I wanted to be part of the solution. I wanted for people that, couldn't buy a home for whatever reason, I wanted to have a home that people could rent. Did that for a few years. It didn't work out great. It's um I was only charging about $25 to $50 over what I was paying for my mortgage. And because of that, that's why I think we need to be figuring out how we can charge I don't think homegrown landlords are, and I'm going to get some slack for this too. I don't think homegrown landlords are necessarily a bad thing, especially when you live in a place like Fort Wayne, where for whatever reason, so many people cannot get approved for homes. So at least having more homes for people so that way maybe they can do rent to own, that type of thing, to help them with that equity. But I also, again, cannot emphasize enough the need to consider alternative resource or revenue sources, getting our revenue from a place that is not just property taxes, because they are such a hot button issue. One of the things that we do all of the time, all over this country, but particularly it feels like in this state, is we give tax abatements to large corporations that are not, that, give all of these promises for who they're going to hire and how they're going to help infrastructure in the city and how they're going to, do XYZ thing. But then we don't see that. We need to start putting shorter term limits on those tax abatements if we're going to offer them, or we need to start offering them less, because they they've taken over, whether it's someone who is a more local homegrown large corporation or large corporations that are from other places.
Healthcare affordability affects families across Allen County. What state level action comes first?
So I'm going to start with, in a perfect world. In a perfect world, it would be single payer healthcare, full stop. Um, because single payer healthcare allows us to do a couple of different things. This allows the individual, the patient, to know that services are covered, that you're not going to have to sit and worry about if any service is being covered at the end of the day. There's a lot of anxiety that comes with being medically challenged. I know from experience. And also, right now, we have to worry if there are laws that are going to change it. I live in complete fear of the pre existing condition rules being overturned, because I actually lived what life was like with with that not existing. Right when I was first exiting college, had some medical things that happened, and it became okay. Am I going to be able to get insurance that makes sense? This also does allow providers to know that payment is coming, because we do need to be paying our doctors, we do need to be paying our nurses, and we need to have more of those individuals. Right now, we have a shortage of nurses. Nurses are traveling all over the country trying to find jobs, and they're having to live in that space. This allows providers to know that payment is coming, so that way they can also set good, stabilized payment for their workers. And also, single payer healthcare would take away the amount of time that hospital networks, individual providers, so on and so forth, have to take to argue with insurance companies about why things are pivotal, or why they are critical for patient care. Again, I know this from experience. I had an MRI scheduled back in 2019. It had been scheduled for several weeks. It was with my preferred hospital network. And I basically get a call that says that they are canceling my MRI because the insurance company had said that it wasn't going to pay for it. What the insurance company didn't say, and then I spent 4 hours on the phone fighting with them about, because you have to go through the loop, was that, well, they needed me to listen to their little spiel about going to a different place before they would do that. I have lots of healthcare examples, so many healthcare examples. However, absent single-payer healthcare, there are already some of these in the works at the State House, and some of these are bipartisan issues. So putting a law in place that ensures hospitals are not charging above a national average for services, requiring that hospital networks are not allowed to have an abatement or a write-off just because they're opening a new building, bought out a small doctor's practice. That happened to my doctor's practice back when I was in my 20s. Or donated a considerable amount of funds. These are all ways where it seems like they avoid having to pay their fair share and actually penalizing them if they're not following strict regulations if they want those types of abatements. Also ensuring that the largest corporations in the area are providing their employees with high quality healthcare options that actually allow people to use their healthcare without going into debt. At my previous place of work, I was paying almost $200 a month in health insurance. So just for my premiums, I had a $10,000 out-of-pocket max rather than one that actually, makes sense, while making under 40K a year. And I've been hitting my out-of-pocket max every year since 2016. This might actually be the first year that I don't since 2016. This was not offered to individuals that worked at this location part-time, which was it was a public place, so it should have been offering people better health care. Insurance was also complicated. There were tier 1, 2, and 3 services, and most of the tier 1 services were either prohibitively far away. At one point they suggested that I start seeing a new provider who was 40 minutes away when my current primary care provider was 3 minutes away from me. So either having to travel further, or that you could use two tier 2 providers, you just paid more for it. And at this particular place, HSA contributions per person were $1,300 a person when I started working for them back in 2016. And I looked it up today. It is $400 a family. Fort Wayne Community Schools employees have access to a special clinic where they can get health care. I believe that this is now provided by one of the local hospital networks. But a healthcare clinic like that only provides the basics. As someone who has lived with the need for specialty healthcare for over 10 years now, my question is, what happens when you need specialty healthcare? Well, then you have to pay for it. And also another very important thing to me, and I think something that's important to a lot of people, is the ability to consistently see the same doctor. So that way you're not having to constantly retell your story. And again, this is so important for specialty healthcare. Another large employer in Fort Wayne that is positioned very much in District 81, has an on-site medical clinic for employees as well as employees' families, which is a great benefit. But then my question becomes, what happens when there's emergencies outside of those hours? What are their benefits like if you have to go to the emergency room, or again, if you need specialty care?
As development expands, how do you balance growth with environmental protection?
So I want to make something very clear. Environmental protection has been part of my life since I was in elementary school. I went to Holland Elementary School, which at the time was the science magnet in Fort Wayne Community Schools. We learned from a very young age about protecting the environment. We had wetlands that were literally across the field from the school that we went and we did science projects. We learned about our ecosystems. We had animals that lived in the school. We had a garden and a whole setup outside of the school. And every year we were expected to engage in recycling projects. There was actually a project, and I talked to a number of people. I talked to my younger sister. I talked to my best friend from elementary school. I talked to my mom before this. There was a project where the winning was you did enough of, I think it was collecting cans, but none of us could remember for sure. And if we collected enough cans in terms of poundage, I think our principal would go and stay up on the roof of the school for an entire weekend, or might have even been an entire week, but it was several days that he would go up there. And this was all in the name of teaching us conservation and learning how to be good citizens of our environment, just as much as they were teaching us to be good citizens of the world. As growth happens, environmental damage is going to happen. This is difficult and expensive to reverse. We see this across Central America, or the center of the United States, where they have taken out year acres worth of trees that used to protect us on the east side of the country from wind and from dust and that type of thing. Those trees were put in there as a result of the various dust bowls. And so that is why we're seeing some of the weather that we're seeing, or at least in part why we're seeing some of the weather that we're seeing now. It's going to be almost impossible. It'll be another 2 generations if we planted trees today to reverse that and get us back where we were. We see this happening across the world too, where we see the jungles of the Amazon and various places are being forested, and now they're threatening to do even more of that in our national parks, and we're losing more of our national parks. Protecting natural resources early in development prevents long-term environmental issues. Developers need to be evaluating what is going to happen to the environment before they start a project, rather than just looking at their bottom line. They need to look at what the local ecosystem is and how they're going to disrupt it. Look at wildlife habitats, and also, almost, I want to say most importantly, but this is all super important, but look at water flow patterns. Because when you go in and you develop a new neighborhood or develop a new property, you do change the water flow, and that can cause flooding somewhere down the line that you do not expect. I remember when I lived in my my first house as an adult, they were doing a massive project a few roads over, one of the big roads in Fort Wayne. And my house, which was a bi-level home, it was a daylight basement, bi-level home, it flooded. And the only thing that made sense, because it had never flooded before, aside from the fact that we had roots in a line. Um, but they were messing with the drainage a couple roads over, and they were like big things that they were putting in. And so I have always attributed some of the flooding that we saw in that storm where we flooded to that project that was happening, because they weren't looking at water flow patterns. So this can help minimize flooding risks, again, protecting natural habitats, that we aren't losing more animals and more bees and things that keep us alive too, and also ensure that the world is beautiful for our children and our grandchildren and generations to come.
Small businesses in the district are competing in a changing economy. What specific policies would help them?
Well, one of the things that we do for large corporations is we offer tax abatements. I feel like those should be offered to smaller businesses. And there should be a process that helps walk you through it, because the process of doing it is not something that's easy to do. I've actually started a small business, and it is not there's not a lot of resources that are easily accessible out there, and there needs to be. So if there are funds out there, those processes need to be clearly identified. If it's something that's hidden deep on a website, that is not something that is accessible. If it's written in legal jargon, it is not accessible. And if it's not accessible in multiple languages, it's not accessible. It is my firm belief that one of the things that makes this country great is the fact that we have small business, and we have the ability for anybody to come up with an idea and build something from the ground up. That is something that's very special here. But this should be rewarded instead of made more difficult, where monopolies are what are ultimately rewarded. And so I feel like, again, even just helping people understand the process of starting a small business and making it so that processes are more accessible, I feel like would be a great step in the right direction.
So, traffic congestion is increasing in this corridor. What transportation priorities would you push? Which roads are worse, 69 or Coliseum?
Don't ask that question. I was just stuck in traffic on Coliseum before Comets game last week. Neither of them
We're
are
done with
great.
this interview. No, you're a Vomits fan. Sorry.
Oh, oh
Fuel
no. I'm a Fort Wayne native. We live and breathe the Comets here.
the Vomits. The Fort Wayne Vomits.
No. Oh, no. I shouldn't have said it. Actually, know what? No, I will stand on this. I am a Comets fan. I'm a very proud Comets fan.
I'm a hockey guy. I grew up to
I'm
hockey,
I'm
so
I love hockey. I love hockey so much. So, wow, we got distracted. Again, increase public transportation. Now, this is obviously more important in the city. When I heard this corridor, my brain automatically went to my big north-south streets here in Fort Wayne. So, my Lima Road, my Coldwater Road, my Coliseum, all of these roads that the more people that are driving on them, the more we have that traffic congestion. And I genuinely believe it's in large part because we don't have a strong public transportation system. But additionally, about 10 years ago, yeah, it was about 10 years ago now, transportation budgets for Fort Wayne Community Schools specifically were slashed. They had to go to a model where any elementary school student who is 1 mile away has to walk or find alternative transportation, 1.5 miles for middle school students, and 2 miles for high school students. And so that what that means is then because a lot of parents aren't making their kids walk to school anymore, especially their little ones, but they're high school kids too. A lot of parents are, they're driving their kids to school. They're doing it in a rush because they're trying to get to work too. And that means there's more traffic congestion at those times of day. There's also a lot more people coming in from outlying areas that are, that are working at the various hospitals and other large corporations. And so I would say also ensuring that, because we have them in this city, I think, sometimes I question, smart traffic lights, ensure that they're functioning as expected. I Coliseum is particularly heinous about this, it feels like, where they are just off just enough that they don't work as they are intended. This might mean more budget to allow for new technology. And then also, this is one that's particularly poignant to me. Poignant is the word I was looking for earlier. When companies allow their employees to work a flexible schedule or work remotely, this does help with traffic congestion, and there are always going to be fields where we cannot do that. But there are other fields where there's absolutely no problem with doing that, and people are being told that they have to come into work for a myriad of reasons. But allowing for flexible schedules would also help this some.
I remember going the several times that for my birthday or New Year's Eve hockey games would go up to Fort Wayne, and yeah, traffic on Coliseum, especially on game night,
Yep,
is
awful.
ridiculous.
I was on Coliseum for 40 minutes last Friday, and I
Ugh,
didn't wanna get out of the lane and get back in because I had a special parking pass. I was there for a friend's birthday, and he had given us all parking passes, and so I needed to stay in that right lane and stay there until before the light, so I didn't wanna mess with it. And it was my car actually got bumped because of how
ugh.
bad the traffic was and how stressed out people were, and, like, I get it, but another thing that we don't have is we don't have traffic control, at least it doesn't seem like on game nights. Um,
I think
but
my worst game that we went up there with was, I want to say 5 years ago. It was for my birthday, so at February 28th game,
Mhm,
when they were playing the Fuel, um, and a freak snowstorm came out of nowhere,
mhm,
and we were stuck in Fort Wayne because
uh-huh,
the snow was so bad that we cannot go down 69 to
yep,
get back to Indianapolis, well, down to Martinsville. And yeah, how wide Coliseum is at some
mhm,
parts, it was like 10 cars wide because you couldn't see. where the lane markers were, so just cars were the Midwest.
The
Am I
yeah,
in a lane?
yeah. Well, and that's when I just stay home because my anxiety is too bad for that. I just try to not go anywhere in those situations.
Well, talking about anxiety, mental health services remain stretched. What new investments are necessary?
So this is something that's incredibly um close to my heart. I feel like we need to be one of the areas that I've seen the most is that we need to be investing in providers who are required to get degrees, get licensures, take testing, only to enter in a system that essentially requires them to, going back to a couple questions ago, start their own business essentially. So many of the locations where mental health providers can go and get a job, they're a 1099 employee and they have to file their own taxes and they have to, they have to do all of that on their own, even though they're technically getting a paycheck through that organization. I feel like if, first of all, if we're going to require that, we need to make that process easier. Um, or if mental health providers are going to open a private practice where they're going to be hiring other individuals, we need to be focusing on making sure that they're making those locations a W-2, maybe where people can get on a group health plan together because the fact that our mental health providers are among, I think, some of the worst insured in the country. They can't get what they need. And also that workplace, a lot of the time, if they are a W-2 employee, they are being required to meet certain quotas in order to keep their job there. So there's a lot that needs to be invested in. And I think it starts with, again, looking at it from that small business perspective and making those processes easier to follow.
As a Democrat in a Republican controlled House, how would you pass legislation that produces real outcomes?
So first, I want to put out there, out into the universe, that I'm really hoping that if I get elected, if people are willing to elect me, that we will have at the very least, a, equal House, if not maybe a little bit of a majority Democrat. So, that is my wish universe. Please let's make it happen. But at the core, so much of what the state should be taking care of, unlike what it is taking care of, but so much of what the state should be taking care of should be considered nonpartisan. We should be talking about boring things like roads and like budgets and how to help small businesses and how to help our schools, how to help our people with healthcare. Instead of some of the things, I don't know if you realize this, but during this session, one of the big hard-hitting bills that got put up at the exact same time as the redistricting was whether we should have the pork tenderloin as our state sandwich. That one really just bugged me for some reason. Um, so we need to get back to considering more nonpartisan issues and focusing on our constituents. And get further from issues that demean and diminish members of our population. We need to be taking care of people. So this includes making sure that the infrastructure that everyone uses, we've talked a little bit about how you come up to Fort Wayne, I go down to Indianapolis. We're all using that infrastructure if we're Hoosiers, making sure that those things are taken care of, ensuring our children are educated and cared for. And that and is very important to me. When a child goes to school, they need to be cared for. The teachers need to care about them. The administration needs to care about them, but it needs to be more than a glorified daycare. They need to be getting educated as well. And I don't think our teachers are doing that, but I think that there are some policies going into place that tie the teachers' hands sometimes. Keeping all of us healthy in this state. So that includes good health care and making sure that we're making environmental policy that is going to keep us healthy. And then finally, like I said before, allowing for the bedrock of our economy to flourish, which is small businesses.
And probably the most important question out of all of them, and that's why I save it for last. Why you and why now?
So I'm going to start with why me. I have lived in Indiana my entire life. I've lived in the same 3 zip codes my entire life. Actually, really, I've lived in the same 2 zip codes for most of my life. And all of those have been in this northwest corner of Allen County. I have been living in neighborhoods that make up District 81 now, even if it wasn't always called District 81. It used to be slightly different before the most recent redistricting. I've watched these communities grow, change, and face new challenges as we have grown. While I don't have kids of my own, I've hosted exchange students. So I experienced public school as a student and then experienced it as an adult through the eyes of my kids that were from other countries. That experience has allowed me to see things through multiple perspectives and also allowed me to experience the power of public schooling in multiple ways, including where I got my college degrees, which was Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. Sorry, I can't call it by that other name that we call it now. I have lived, worked, and been educated here. I understand how state level policies affect everything, and how local government can work with state government to make this a better place for all of us. Why now? There are a few reasons why I'm running now. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a social studies teacher. My plan was to go to college and get a social studies degree. Well, in the time period where I was in college, we had, believe it or not, teacher we had too many teachers, specifically in social studies at the time. And so I changed my degrees. I switched to communication and fell in love with that, fell in love with teaching it in higher education. But one of my areas that was always a passion project for me was political science. Loved it. I've wanted to work in public service my whole life. I call myself a servant leader. And until now, I haven't had the personal infrastructure to support working within that framework. I have a job that I can do this now. I have I have my health under control, etc. The second thing, and this is probably the most important, I fear that as a woman, I may not have this privilege, which I very much consider this a privilege, that much longer. If things continue down the path that they are currently continuing, I'm afraid I may not even be able to vote come November. I don't think it would happen in November, but if things don't change in the midterms, I don't think I'll be able to vote for the next president. I could be being alarmist, but I don't think I am. I had a grandmother who was a very strong feminist, massive feminist. And I know my grandma fought hard for the privileges that I now have. And I feel like I want to respect that. Finally, we're on year 13 of the legislator who currently holds this position, being in this position with very few changes, not seeing this individual out in the public eye. I've never met him, and I've lived here my entire life. He doesn't seem really interested in trying to make change for us. He has a couple good bills here and there, but it doesn't seem like he necessarily advocates for them. He seems solely focused on helping us with an admittedly important issue, which is making not-for-profit hospitals accountable. But otherwise, he's just on the party line. Doesn't really, you don't really see him give opinions, and that line is not what's going to help the average Hoosier. I want to see, even though I don't have my own kids, I want to see our community be strong for generations to come, for my nieces and my nephews. And it's important that people understand where our community is headed. And I want to be part of a community that listens to its residents, wants to know what they have to say, wants to know what's important to them, and focuses on solutions that stand the test of time rather than patching a pothole.
Yeah, the tenderloin thing really got to me. I mean, it hit hard. I'm glad they were fighting for it.
I just think it was an
Sure.
inappropriate time.
Yeah, I know. It's like we just got done with redistricting and all that. Hey, how about the tenderloin? Like,
No, they announced it the same day. I was sitting in emerging leaders and they announced it. We were sitting there.
Like, oh, I mean, yes, it is very important to have a state food, or a state sandwich, but
not right now.
it was de facto. It was de facto.
And they didn't even pass it.
I know. Like, how the hell?
Hi, I'm Jackson Franklin. I'm a proud Democrat running to replace Victoria Sparks here in Indiana's 5th Congressional District. I grew up in Albany, but today I call Muncie my home. I'm a registered paramedic and a combat medic in the Indiana Army National Guard, and I've served for 7 years. Because of my experiences, I know how to put people first in moments of crisis. But this campaign isn't about me, it's about who this government is supposed to serve. Strong communities start with investing in the people who hold them together. That means paying teachers the wages they deserve, strengthening our unions for our workers to have a real voice and living wages, and ensuring that every Hoosier has a healthy environment to call home. This campaign is about building a government that works for all of us. If you're tired of politics as usual, if you're ready for bold, people-powered leadership, then join our grassroots campaign. Together, we won't only win these coming elections, we will truly create a system that places people over profits. I'm Jackson Franklin, and I approve this message.
Sharon, we've talked about growth, schools, taxes, and healthcare. Now we simplify it. No long answers, no hedging. This is hold 'em or fold 'em. Agree, you hold 'em. You disagree, you fold 'em. Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's deal the cards. Healthcare should be treated as a human right with movement toward universal public coverage.
I mean, hold them in the most emphatic way, which is hard to do because you're
So
just
double down?
double down. Heck yeah.
That is your double down. Indiana should raise the minimum wage and index it to inflation.
Yes. Hold them.
Workers should have stronger legal protections to unionize without retaliation.
Oh, 100% hold them.
Candidates should refuse corporate PAC or questionable special interest money, even if it costs them politically.
Hold them.
Indiana should invest more aggressively in renewable energy while creating local jobs.
Hold them.
Public schools should be fully funded before expanding private voucher programs.
Hold them.
Universal background checks are necessary to improve gun safety.
Hold them.
Housing affordability requires expanded workforce housing and stronger tenant protections.
Again, another emphatic hold them. I don't like that I can't talk more about this, but yeah, hold them.
Mental health services deserve significant new state investment.
Hold them.
Elected officials must be willing to challenge their own party when constituents' needs come first.
Hold them.
Sharon, District 81 is a turning point. Northwest Fort Wayne is expanding. Huntertown is changing quickly. Arcola still reflects the steady rhythm of rural Indiana. Growth can strengthen a district or strain it. Leadership determines which. Families here want stability. They want safe neighborhoods, strong schools, reasonable taxes, healthcare they can afford. Whatever voters decide, thank you for stepping forward in a district where expectations are high and engagement matters. And to everyone watching and listening here in Indiana, across the country, and to our audience joining us from Europe, democracy doesn't slow down when communities grow. It becomes more important. So as always, stay informed, ask questions, and hold them accountable.